because we are going to conclude paper 1 properly now. And if time would permit, we may briefly go into philosophy of religion. So you remember we were discussing Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo, though a Vedantin, but has tried to give us a kind of a Purnavad, integralism. So-called material reality and so-called spiritual reality are not exclusive. Everything that is in this world, as diverse, plural, animate, inanimate, human, non-human, flora, fauna, they all have intrinsically the same character. And that is like the divinity, which is the Brahman. And that Brahman takes a plunge into ignorance, it withholds its perfection, and it manifests itself as a divine consciousness, supermind. Then again, there is a plurality of selves, and from divine plane, it descends. It goes down to the lowest point possible. And after going down, it is like a descent in evolution. As you know, there is a gradual progression now of going up. Descent must be followed by ascent. And we, as humans, are into an intermediary plane, like a transitional being. We have a consciousness, and we can opt for this life of integral yoga, whereby we can prepare ourselves collectively so that there can be an evolution of a human consciousness, a human life into a life divine. So overall, it is like how that perfect light has to flourish. So it is like outflowering of divine in the collectivity of humanity. And this worldview, this active engagement is termed by him as integral yoga. So yoga is not merely Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. It is not merely about bringing nirodh of chitta vritti, but it goes to a state of worldview where we have something like a widening, heightening, and then integration. It is a life that you cannot opt in isolation. You go for a life of seclusion. One may withdraw into a cave, which one may be oblivious of what is happening around. It is like a very holistic, active participation in life, where you cultivate a sense of kinship with humans and non-humans, which may result into social, economic, political transformation. It may change the paradigm, the dominant paradigm. There can be kind of restructuring of social, economic, political institutions whereby equality, liberty, fraternity, justice can be attained. So this life is a kind of approach which you can also use to talk about environmental ethics. When we think about one earth, one family, one future, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we say one sun, one creed. We are talking about zero emissions, sustainable development, which is like organic way of living. You see that in Aurobindo's worldview, all such ideas have been well integrated. To be religious is not to develop alienation from humanity and from the mundane life, but to act very passionately in this life. And that is how don't seek God over and above you in any religious institution, but look for that intrinsic principle of divinity. Locate that in a fellow human, locate that even in flora, fauna. A so-called stone may be as pious, as sacred as human beings could be, and that is how it is very progressive. So this is a theory of evolution. All other theories, call it mechanical, repetitive, teleological, in some way, all of them have been beautifully integrated in Aurobindo's perspective. So we had almost completed it. Last just 2-3 lines, even if we don't write, it will not make any difference because idea is already shared, but we'll write. And then we'll come to the questions on Aurobindo. And sometime you have seen questions may refer to Nimbad, Vallabh, Chaitanya. We will briefly talk about them. Then we'll go to some questions, which is not specific to one tradition, but it requires a kind of overview. It requires a good in-depth understanding of some issues which have been discussed by various traditions. So there are a few such questions. I have already listed them down. We'll go through them. And most likely we'll get some time. We will come to philosophy of religion as well. तो चलिए पहले जो बाकी है उसको लिखा जाए. तो बताएं कुछ. What was the last line? अच्छा. लिखें. The integral yoga prescribes a path whereby every intermediary reality can eventually transform itself into a life divine. Aurobindo's philosophy is a synthesis of Indian and Western traditions. He uniquely integrates the profound insights of ancient Vedic scriptures with the modern social, political, and scientific notions of West. His conception of life divine is similar to, yeah, analogous to, his conception of life divine is similar to the Atman doctrine of the Upanishads. However, Aurobindo's interpretation of Advaita Vedanta is not quite fair. Like the Western scholars, Aurobindo regards Shankar's philosophy as a world-negating philosophy. Shankar's philosophy as a world-negating philosophy. He as in Aurobindo, Shri Aurobindo equates Shankar's Mayavad with the subjective idealism of Berkeley. He equates Shankar's Mayavad with the subjective idealism of Berkeley. So that is why his understanding of Shankar is not very fair, or it is again like a straw human fallacy. So with this we conclude Aurobindo, and let's come to the questions. I think there was a question in 2023. So this is a 5E, that is, it is a short notes. Explain the nature and role of supermind in evolution as per Aurobindo's philosophy. So could you relate with the question? What is very important? Evolution hai. Role of supermind in evolution. And what is evolution? Ascent, not descent. But you do know, why can there be ascent? Because after all, where, say, a stone is aspiring to reach, that higher stage is already at the lower stage. So if there is a stage of evolution, then evolution is possible because there is a prior descent. And hence, we can evolve only when supermind comes down to take it up. For example, the diagram that I have drawn in the case of evolution, so if it has to go up, it has to come down. You seek knowledge, and knowledge descends. So we ascend to knowledge, and knowledge descends. So through the process of integral yoga, we as a human can have widening, heightening, and integration. And when we are able to prepare the ground, then it is like if there is a urge from lower, then there is a corresponding response from above. So there is a call, an aspiration from collectivity, and supermind would respond back, and that is how we all will evolve, and there is a transformation of a human life into a life divine. तो इसको लिखने में आपको बाकी सारी चीजों की मदद लेनी होगी. It is पूर्णवाद, it is a kind of creation which is inclusive of descent, ascent, evolution. And how can we prepare this ground? We can prepare through integral yoga. What is integral yoga? Background में पूर्णवाद वगैरह देते हुए, it is not mere breath control. It is like a very holistic, active participation. And when we have this sense of kinship, horizontally, vertically, then we can ensure through that earnestness outflowering of divine into collectivity of humanity. So it is not about seeking an individual's salvation. It is like seeking transformation of life holistically, collectively. तो इन सब बातों के साथ आप बता सकते हैं कि कैसे super mind descends into mind, life, matter. It gives rise to plurality of selves, then psyche as a soul, and super mind is the divine plane. It comes down to empirical plane to uplift us with itself. So again, we can have the aspiration, we can have the preparation, but there is a corresponding response from above. So ये है 2023. Now come to 2022. Almost the same question in different ways have been asked. In some cases, there can be emphasis on maybe evolution, involution, or descent, ascent, integral yoga. You may put emphasis on one aspect over other. लेकिन कहानी आपको holistically ही जाननी है. Explain and evaluate the role of integral yoga in the process of triple transformation for individual evolution as expounded by Shri Aurobindo. So what is the process of triple transformation? And it is talking about individual evolution. So it is the process of triple transformation is possible through integral yoga. So in a way, integral yoga can pave the path towards the process of triple transformation. What is that? Widening, heightening, and integration. So in some way, this triple transformation is that human, as a transitional being, cultivates a sense of kinship with a fellow human, is able to take a cognizance of the intrinsic divinity in every other realm, and then aspires to integrate oneself with the divine. So this is how, in some way, what is happening is triple transformation, that as an individual, we have a sense of now universal fraternity, kinship, with the humans who are at the same plane, with the non-humans, inanimate, you can also say life and matter, and then it is able to evolve oneself into a life divine. So this is how the third stage will be, from where from empirical level one can graduate to divine level, and one will integrate oneself with the ultimate, which is the Brahman. So this is how integral yoga can pave the path, and thereby there is a kind of triple transformation. But this triple transformation is possible because there is a prior descent of supreme reality to the lowest possible point. So since there is a descent through integral yoga, there can be ascent, and this can result into triple transformation. In every possible realm that we are existing, we get to know how there is underlying common principle. Okay. 2021, थोड़ा टेम्परेचर बढ़ा दीजिएगा, ठंड हो रही है. According to Sri Aurobindo, the awakening of the psychic being and its gradual prominence over all other parts of the being is the first step in the conscious evolution of man or human. In some way, what I told you as widening, that can be put in this way. So who we are a psychic being. याद है, plurality of selves, and we are psychic being. He is inspired by Western terminology, so he is giving different words also, and not only the classical Sanskrit terminology. तो कहाँ से evolution शुरू होता है? Conscious evolution का first step कौन सा है? When there is an awakening of the psychic being, and its a gradual prominence over all other parts of the being, then this is the first step in the conscious evolution of man. In some way, it is like the first step whereby evolution of human life can reach, or human life can transform itself into a life divine. So this may be like widening, it has to go to the next stage, heightening, and then through integral yoga, one has to go beyond egocentric worldview. It is a holistic engagement, it is not a mere breath control or withdrawal of the senses or chitta vritti nirodh, raja yoga, etc. So he is trying to retain all the insights of classical teachings of scriptures, and at the same time uniquely blending it with modern ideals, including equality, liberty, fraternity, justice, and he is trying to prescribe a very profound interpretation of yoga. It is again like integralism, Purnavad, materialism, spiritualism are not exclusive. They are two sides of the same principle. जी.
So all other parts of being means?
All other parts of the being, यानी जितने entities हैं, वो सब उसी being के part हैं. इसको दोनों तरफ से being का मतलब होता है what has existence. So we याद है जैसे philosophy of being and becoming. तो अगर कोई बोलता है being is the nature of reality, that means existence is static. What exists is immutable, unchanging. Or one may say there is a being which is the ultimate, and all other things are the parts of that being. So in some way, in Aurobindo, what exactly exists is one. But in the empirical plane, it can manifest itself as many. So apparently, it can go down to the inanimate state of matter also. And it can be in a psychic state of a human also. And hence, we as a psychic being can develop a sense of oneness, can take a cognizance of the intrinsic life divine underneath everything. And this outlook can help you prepare a ground, so that the moment supermind descends, we all will be uplifted collectively. So it is not merely the evolution of an individual, it is the outflowering of divinity in the collectivity of humanity. So ये stand out करता है idea इनका. 2020, what does Aurobindo mean by life divine as a possibility and inevitability? इस पे सोचिए जरा कि क्या मतलब हो सकता है.
Integration of the
मैं तो थोड़ा सा आपको इंट्रोडक्शन उस हिसाब से बनाना होगा कि लाइफ डिवाइन का पॉसिबिलिटी और इनएविटेबिलिटी से क्या मतलब है.
Because of ignorance, we are not able to integrate with the essence.
हाँ, तो अभी इसको ऐसे समझिए that what is real is Brahman. Okay? And this Brahman takes a plunge into ignorance. हम और आप उसमें कोई रोल प्ले नहीं कर रहे हैं. It purposefully withholds its perfection, and now it manifests itself as a super mind. Then again, it leads to plurality of selves. This is which plane? This is a divine plane. Question है कि possibility और inevitability जो है life divine का, उससे क्या मतलब है? So possibility is that it can go down to the lowest point possible. And this is how there is a kind of gradual descent. Okay? ये है इसकी possibility. What is the inevitability? Inevitability is that if there is a descent, which is a possibility, then after all, there is an intrinsic divinity. it is not anything else, but the supreme being has come down to the lowest possible level or point. So inevitability is that all of them can eventually ascend and go back into life divine. The only possibility is that a life divine can transform itself through the process of descent, can through the process of involution, can go to the lowest possible realm of existence, like psyche, mind, life, and matter. This is the possibility. The inevitability aspect is that there is a corresponding ascent. After all, matter has nothing but a life in it. Life has nothing but a mind in it. Mind has nothing but a psyche in it. And they have nothing but a super mind in it. Super mind is nothing but a Brahman itself. So hence, it is inevitable that what has gone down will again go through the process of evolution. And that descent and ascent can be possible for a human psyche through the life of integral yoga. तो हम और आप इसके लिए consciously कोशिश कर सकते हैं, which may not be possible for a stone or for plant or animal. You can play vital role whereby this outflowering can be achieved, realized without any further delay, and that is how our position is different. तो ये है पॉसिबिलिटी, और इनएविटेबल का मतलब तो समझ ही रहे हैं ना. इनएविटेबल इज समथिंग, जैसे बोलते हैं अवश्यम भावी, वो होके रहेगा. Like determinism, if there is a cause, you cannot escape effect. Like in Spinoza, everything follows necessarily. That is like inevitable. If I remove my fingers, then it is inevitable that it will fall down. It cannot be ruled out. In a deductive argument, valid deductive argument, premises are there, conclusion is inevitable. तो इसीलिए क्योंकि हर चीज है तो ब्राह्मण, it is inevitable that it will be eventually withdrawn back. It will go from where it has originated. तो इस तरह से देखा तो ये भी लीला है. रियलिटी का इस तरह से नीचे आना एक लीला है. हम और आप इसको नहीं समझ सकते हैं. 2019. Explain the unique position of the supermind in the metaphysical scheme of Aurobindo's philosophy. तो लगभग आपके नोट्स में जैसे लिखा है वही बात है. तो what is the unique position of supermind? Supermind is something like the state of Brahman, where Brahman has taken a plunge into ignorance purposefully, and then has taken the form of divine consciousness. From this divine consciousness, a human consciousness comes, and then it descends at empirical level into psyche, as a mind, as a life, as a matter. Psyche को यहाँ भी लिख दें तो कोई confusion नहीं है, एक ही बात है. तो now supermind has enabled Brahman to go down to the lowest level possible, and then supermind is like an interface. Supermind is like an interface into the empirical beings and the Brahman on the other hand. So through the supermind, Brahman descends, and through the intervention of supermind, everything is restored to its original position. So supermind will come down to bring us back to the original plane, and that is how its role is very crucial. Let's say interface. What is evolution according to Sri Aurobindo? Describe the process of triple transformation and the nature of Gnostic being in his philosophy. So this is not different from 2022 question with just some reformulation. So you already understand what is evolution. You cannot discuss evolution in isolation. Although evolution is like evolution whereby every entities of the empirical world can transform themselves into a life divine. So it is a process of ascent. But evolution is possible since there is a prior precedent descent in evolution. And in this evolution, integral yoga can play a significant role. Humans are transitional beings. They have a consciousness, and they, through introspection, through the readings of scriptures, through their own inquiry, can develop this outlook, inclusive outlook. And this integral yoga can help them transform themselves through the process of widening, heightening, integration. By the way, what is this Gnostic being? Gnostic being का क्या है concept? Gnostic is like this Brahman is the underlying reality. यानी हर चीज के अंदर the divinity is there. It is like the spark of divine is in everything. It is not how something appears apparently, but a Gnostic being is like the supreme being intrinsically present in everything. जैसे मान लीजिए कि कोई prank खेल रहे हो कोई, and imagine that one of you crack the exam, and you can be seen like by many students and inspiration. They may put you at some stature. लेकिन हो सकता है जब दोस्तों के बीच में है तो आप भी कोई prank कर रहे हैं, कि कुछ एक साधारण सा एक इंसान बन के कुछ काम कर रहे हैं. तो Gnostic is like your true being is something else, but that time you can be like an ordinary individual. वो एक जो इन पे बायोपिक बनी है MSD पे, उसमें एक सीन है कि वो अपने कुछ कॉलीग के साथ एक प्रैंक करते हैं कि फोन जो महीनों से डेड पड़ा है उस पर वो बात कर रहा है, तो उसको मालूम पड़ता है कि फोन तो डेड है, फिर लंबी लंबी बातें किससे करता है. तो दे ऑल हैव दिस प्लान. तो मान लीजिए कि कोई वुड बी, बट दैट टाइम ही वाज जस्ट अ फ्रेंड, बट ही इज समवन हु इज गोइंग टू बी लाइक द थाला, द ग्रेटेस्ट ऑफ हिज टाइम. तो दिस इज ऑल लाइक कि Gnostic बीइंग क्या है, स्टोन में Gnostic बीइंग क्या है, the Brahman, the divine consciousness is present. In some way, everything is coming down, and thereby the Gnostic being is intrinsically present. It is underneath everything, and that is why this process of the same ascent, ascent is possible. So this ascent is possible because, after all, matter में life है, life में mind है, mind में supermind है. Okay. 2017. How does Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga help in the realization of supramental consciousness? तो लगभग यही क्वेश्चन है बार बार। सुप्रा मेंटल कॉन्शियसनेस का क्या मतलब है? दिस इज कॉन्शियसनेस, ह्यूमन कॉन्शियसनेस, एंड दिस इज लाइक डिवाइन कॉन्शियसनेस। तो हाउ कैन इंटीग्रल योग हेल्प? इट इज लाइक ए वर्ल्ड व्यू वेयर बाय यू वाइडन, you heighten, you integrate yourself, you try to prepare the ground, you realize that the good of one is not contained in the good of one in isolation, but it has to be attained horizontally, vertically, and thereby when you prepare the ground, when there is a urge from lower, there is a response from above, and we all will be then transformed, evolved into a state whereby human life is evolved into a life divine. 2016 discuss Aurobindo's views on evolution and involution. How do they differ from traditional yoga philosophy? So traditional yoga philosophy is often about individual liberation. It is in many ways world negating. And in this case, it is not a life of asceticism, withdrawing into cave, but it is about holistic and active engagement in the life that is around you. It is a life which ensures many social, economic, political transformation. And when you seek liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, it is integral part of integral yoga, and that is how it is different from the classical traditional yoga. थोड़ा सा आप इसमें जोड़ सकते हैं. The way Buddha's conception of Bodhisattva or Mahayana's conception of Bodhisattva is explained in many ways. Aurobindo comes close to that as well. The integral yoga also prescribes a life of Maitri Karuna. 2015 श्री औरोबिंदोज इंटीग्रल योग. इसमें फिर ये भी देख सकते हैं ट्रेडिशनल योग जो है दैट इज जनरली एट्रीब्यूटेड टू पतंजलि. तो इन पतंजलि थ्रू अष्टांग योग, Purush, who is a spiritual being, gets a life of Keval, self-realization, as being different from matter, Prakriti. So while a traditional yoga prescribes a separation of spirit from matter, integral yoga emphasizes on Purnavad, integration of spirit with matter. तो ये एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है. Okay. श्री औरोबिंदोज इंटीग्रल योग. तो जहां भी आप जैसे मान लीजिए दिस सिंपल क्वेश्चन औरोबिंदोज इंटीग्रल योग, यू कैन अगेन से हाउ हिज इंटीग्रल योग इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम ट्रेडिशनल योग. और ये एक बहुत अच्छा बुलेट पॉइंट आप एम्फसाइज कर सकते हैं. How is Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga an advancement over Patanjali yoga? In the same way, in some way, Patanjali's yoga is talking about separation, exclusion. That is, it is world negating. It is withdrawing into one's inner core. But in the case of Aurobindo, जैसे मान लो ने शब्द दे ही दिया है Gnostic being. So there, the nature of reality is such that it has a Gnostic element in it. And what is the Gnostic element? It has a divinity within. And so-called matter has that life divine. So-called spirit has the same thing. And that is how it is possible to integrate them. And hence, integral yoga is one such intervention by Aurobindo. 2013. Explain Sri Aurobindo's conception of a cosmic salvation through spiritual evolution of the individual. फिर से शब्द क्या है? Cosmic salvation. That means it is not the salvation of an individual. It is the salvation of collectivity. It is like the outflowering of divinity in the collectivity of humanity. In fact, humanity, non-humanity together. Through a spiritual evolution of the individual. एक individual का spiritual evolution का मतलब है that consciously an individual opts for a life of integral yoga. And one individual has spiritually evolved. One will widen its perspective, heighten its perspective, develop integration, and can pave the path whereby we all have prepared the ground. The moment divinity descends, we all will be evolved to higher plane. इसको आप बहुत हद तक अपने कई आंसर्स में ले सकते हैं एथिक्स सेशन में. Aurobindo is a name that people in general also talk about. That individual consciousness, spiritual evolution of individual is like if you become a very committed civil servant. Your spiritual evolution can ensure cosmic salvation. The cosmic salvation at different stages, it may be the salvation of a village, and eventually it can be at the level of a global village also. So you try to integrate your being with inner, outer, and then you are trying to evolve holistically. So this is how an individual's spiritual evolution is like integral yoga, and it leads into evolution of a human life into life divine. 2012. Involution is the presupposition of evolution. तो कहीं जो पिछले कुछ क्वेश्चन आपको एक दो लाइन चाहिए तो क्वेश्चन खुद दे रहा है. लेट्स से दैट क्वेश्चन वाज आस्किंग व्हाट इज इवोल्यूशन अकॉर्डिंग टू श्री अरबिंदो. तो यू से इवोल्यूशन इज द प्रोसेस ऑफ असेंट. एक दो लाइन पहले उस पे लिखी एंड देन यू से एन इवोल्यूशन प्रीसपोजेस इवोल्यूशन. सिंस इवोल्यूशन इज द प्रीसपोजिशन ऑफ इवोल्यूशन. कि अगर इवोल्यूशन है तो इसीलिए है क्योंकि इनवोल्यूशन है. इन सम वे इवन वी एज अ चाइल्ड आर लाइक इनवोल्यूशन ऑफ आवर पेरेंट्स. And then a time may come whereby you can be as grown up, as mature. In some cases, sometimes their worldview may also remain, in some cases, a bit conventional or dogmatic, little more than say certain critical student mind. तो आपकी सोच हो सकता है उनसे ज्यादा प्रोग्रेसिव भी हो जाए. तो this is like the same. क्यों? क्योंकि parents may have the same underlying reality which you may also have, and we have come down from them, but ultimately we can be like at the same position. Then you can be the mentor of your parents also. कि आप कल आईएएस बन जाएंगे, लड़के के लिए कहा जाएगा कि बेटे वो जो है वो 5 करोड़ दहेज लेके आए हैं, मैंने मांगा नहीं है, खुद से दे रहे हैं तो क्या हर्ज. And if you say कि आपके बेटे का कोई कीमत नहीं हो तो अनमोल है, 5 करोड़ बहुत सस्ता लगा रहे हैं दाम, तो कोई नहीं खरीद सकता. तो then they are very happy to know कि how well he has put his ideas. तो बहुत सारी बातों को आप उनको जब समझाएंगे तो वो भी फिर उस बात को रिलेट कर पाएंगे. In some way, this is how there is a descent. But why is it that when we are young baby, when we are unable to hold our neck straight, eventually we reach that position because the underlying reality is the same. It's just that it is yet to evolve into its highest possible stage. तो इनकी जो वर्ल्ड व्यू है बहुत साइंटिफिक है. And you do know how through God particles, through nanotechnology, many scientists are trying to talk about something being common across all beings or even inanimate entities. तो God particle के रूप में इनके यहाँ गnostic being है. योग 2011 is more than a psychophysical exercise. फिर से इन्होंने आपको एक वन लाइनर दिया. How do they differ from traditional yoga philosophy? यानी Aurobindo's integral yoga suggests that life of yoga is more than a psychophysical exercise. ये सिर्फ सांस पे कंट्रोल कर लें, कपालभाति कर लें तो वो योग है, लेकिन इसके बियॉन्ड है. And in this case, there is no name, so you can discuss it with reference to more than one thinker, but one of the apt interpretation could be Aurobindo. लेकिन अगर से देखें तो अष्टांग योग में भी यम, नियम, आसन, प्राणायाम, प्रत्याहार are the prerequisites. शुरुआत है धारणा, ध्यान, समाधि. And this is more about a life of contemplation and reflection. But then every time you go to a tradition, they have some metaphysical presumptions. The yoga of Patanjali is Sankhya. Essentially, it is like Seshwar Sankhya. So it will believe that reality is something which is non-material, it is your spiritual being. And whatever is material is not your concern, dissociate yourself. So that is a knowledge of being different from and discriminatory knowledge. कई बार आपने वहाँ लिखा था, we will attain the discriminatory knowledge. And in this case, we will attain the integralism, a knowledge, a sense of integration, a sense of there being Gnostic element present in everything. 2009, compare Patanjali's yoga with integral yoga, expounded by Aurobindo, bringing out clearly points of similarity and dissimilarity. So similarity ये है कि योग is more than mere psychophysical exercise दोनों के लिए. It is a life of contemplation, it is a life of meditation. It is a life whereby one seeks the knowledge of reality as such, the truth. But what is the point of dissimilarity? Points of dissimilarity is that in that yoga of Patanjali, knowledge is of discriminatory nature, and this is Purnavad. So when we are ignorant, in the case of Patanjali, we have, याद है आपको, avidya leads to asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh, and hence we develop a sense of clingingness. But in the case of Aurobindo, when you start to know your true being, you become a more spiritually evolved being. You realize how there is an underlying Gnostic element, and that results into widening, heightening integration. So last में फिर से वही है Aurobindo's conception of evolution and involution, and you must be writing about integral yoga, whereby evolution and involution can come to a proper culmination, where human life is evolved into a life divine. तो Aurobindo को ऐसे भी पढ़िए that you will be able to use him in paper 2 in essay in ethics. Once we go through paper 2 and you are mindful of the topic, you try to listen to the questions carefully, and you come back to paper 1, keep thinking about them. That how can I use, say Plato, certainly you'll see justice is there. Many stories of Plato, including allegory of cave, can help you in both religion and social political. So as you think about model of development, problem of caste, problem of women, female feticide, all of that can be beautifully understood by Aurobindo's integralism, Purnavad. When there be question on personal God, impersonal God, can there be religion without God? What is religion and morality? All of that can be written with reference to Aurobindo's philosophy. Paper 2 is anyway independent, तो आप हर वो idea जो आपको इधर अच्छा लगता है वहाँ use कीजिए. And at the same time, in paper 1 also you write on Charva, criticism में Aurobindo आ सकता है. Western में you have seen Berkeley, you have seen John Locke, they are creating dualism, Descartes is creating dualism. अब सोचिए अपने syllabus से ही कि किससे मैं इसको criticize कर सकती हूँ या कर सकता हूँ. तो जरूरी नहीं है that you memorize every time a name कि गैसेंडी ने क्या कहा. आप अपने syllabus के thinker से एक दूसरे को compare contrast कीजिए. Okay? So now come to some name like Nimbark, Vallabh, and Chaitanya. All of them are Vedantin, and one point can be common to all of them, and that is like they are all Vaishnavite. Vaishnavite. In some way, you have seen a Vaishnavite primarily like Ramanus. Okay. So now, Vaishnavite is someone, this is Ramanus में आपने देखा, पर Brahma is like Vishnu Narayan. And then we have concepts of Vyuha, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyuman, Anirudh. We have the conception of Vibhav, incarnation. We have the conception of Antaryami. जैसे कैसे Gnostic being is like that Antaryami only. लेकिन Antaryami generally बहुत उसमें only human can have, but in the case of Aurobindo, Gnostic being is in every entity, so-called inanimate entity also. And then we have Shri Krishna. So for all of them, Brahman is the reality, and that Brahman is primarily Shri Krishna. Shri Krishna. Okay. Now Nimbark is trying to be a little more like Ramanus. देखा तो तीनों बहुत similar हैं Ramanus से. Madhva से भी similar हैं. But Nimbark is slightly different from Ramanus in this way that Ramanus had told you monism qualified by difference, yani identity qualified by difference. For him, primary is identity. And it is not identity and difference, it is identity. English में कुछ scholars ने कहा it should be identity in and through and because of difference, and identity qualified by difference. But Nimbark is trying to say identity and difference दोनों बराबर हैं. तो identity is like what? अभेद, and difference is भेद. तो एक साथ बोलने में ये इनकी philosophy क्या है? भेद अभेद. तो अभेद को एक साथ लिख दें तो what can it become? भेदाभेद. तो in some way भेद is like what? द्वैत. तो द्वैत and अद्वैत एक साथ हो जाएगा तो क्या हो जाएगा? द्वैता Dvait. So Nimbark's view can be like Dvaita Dvait, or it is like Bhed Abhed. Okay, and there is a God who is Brahman, who is like Krishna, and Prakriti, that is matter, and Jeev are the two other reality. They are in some way identical because they are like extension or attribute, not attributes, powers of a Brahman. And as powers of a Brahman, they are dependent on Brahman only. And then through them, this world is created. Okay, the world is created by what? Jiva, and also by matter. So matter के भी कई grades हैं. Something is like a prakrit, which is like matter of the supreme form, which is like shuddha sattva. This is like matter of the supreme grade, whereby God can have this in his being, and we around us have something that is like of prakriti. तो ये है prakrit. And then matter is like time also, Kal. So Nimbark, like Ramanuj, is suggesting reality of three things. But in the case of Ramanuj, is identity that has primacy. It is identity qualified by difference. Prakriti and Jiva are the attributes. In his case, they are not the attributes. They don't form the body of God, because if they form the body of God, then everything that we suffer, we will start to impose that affect God's being also. So we don't form his body. So इस हिसाब से Ramanuj से similar भी हैं और different भी हैं. So what will be liberation? Liberation can be attained by knowing one's knowledge, one's true knowledge. Who am I? But that knowledge is not possible unless and until there is divine grace. So in all of them you will see predominance of bhakti, grace of God, devotion to God. तो पहले हम लोग निम्बार्क लिख लेते हैं. तो लिखें निम्बार्क, चाहे तो कुछ सिंपल शब्द पहले लिख लीजिए. निम्बार्क्स philosophy propounds, या simply Nimbark propounds Dvaita Dvait. It upholds identity and difference. Parenthesis में लिख सकते हैं भेदा भेद. Nimbark comes very close to Ramanuj. Nimbark comes very close to Ramanuj. He accepts three realities: Brahman, या God, parenthesis में, souls and matter. Souls and matter are dependent on God. Yeah, souls and matter depend on God. Souls and matter are dependent on God. Individual soul is essentially knowledge, but it is also the substratum of knowledge. It is essentially knowledge, but it is also the substratum of knowledge. For example, the sun, S-U-N, is essentially light, but it is also the substratum of light. The soul is a real knower, agent and enjoyer. ये आपको कॉन्ट्रास्ट करने को बता सकता है किससे? सांख्य से. Where पुरुष is always a mere drashta, witness, but soul is a real enjoyer, agent and knower. The souls are atomic and are many in number, or they are atomic in size and many in number. They are plural. They are atomic and plural. Soul is eternal, but due to avidya and karma, it goes through the, चाहे तो vicious जोड़ दीजिए, it goes through the vicious cycle, या cycle of birth and death. Due to avidya and karma, it goes through the vicious cycle of birth and death. Liberation requires right knowledge. However, one can acquire right knowledge only through devotion and the grace of God. One can acquire right knowledge only through devotion and the grace of God. Nimbark classifies matter into colon number 1, चाहे तो कैपिटल करते हैं, अप्राकृत. He classifies matter into number 1, अप्राकृत. ठीक है. It is super matter. Yeah, it is a matter of the supreme grade. It is a super matter, a matter of the supreme grade. It is immutable. It is immutable. The divine body is made up of this. हम और आप उनकी बॉडी नहीं बना रहे हैं like Ramanus. The divine body is made up of this. It is similar to शुद्ध सत्व of Ramanus. शुद्ध, जैसे शुद्ध घी, ऐसे शुद्ध सत्व. Number 2, प्राकृत. It is derived from prakriti. It is derived from prakriti. It has sattva, rajas and tamas. It has sattva, rajas and tamas. And third is kal, colon, the time. आगे लिखें, पैरा चेंज करके. The Brahman is Sagun. He is the personal God, comma, the abode of all good qualities. Abode of all good qualities. He is perfection personified. God is Krishna. God manifests himself in the 4 Vyuha and Vibhav incarnation. इस आपके रामानुज में था. God manifests himself in the form of 4 Vyuha and Vibhav incarnation. बाकी चीजें भी होंगी, अंतर्यामी भी, अर्चावतार भी, तो चाहे तो ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं. God manifests himself in Vyuha, Vibhav, अंतर्यामी and अर्चावतार. ये सब कॉमन होगा. Souls and matter are his powers and not attributes. Hence, God is both. God is both the material and the efficient cause of the universe. God is both material and efficient cause of the universe. The universe or world is a real transformation of his powers. ये point keyword है. His body का नहीं, power का. The world or universe is a real transformation of his capital powers. The relation between God and the universe, या world, the relation between the God and the universe is identity and difference. Identity hyphen and hyphen difference. Souls and matter have no independent existence. Souls and matter have no independent existence. एक हेडिंग बनाए, difference between Nimbark and Ramanus. Difference between Nimbark and Ramanus. Colon number 1. Ramanus propounds identity hyphen qualified by hyphen difference. चाहे तो parenthesis में विशिष्टाद्वैत. Nimbark, on the other hand, भेदा भेद, द्वैता द्वैत, identity and difference. उन्होंने किया identity qualified by difference, which is विशिष्टाद्वैत. Nimbark, on the other hand, propounds identity hyphen and hyphen difference, which is द्वैता द्वैत या भेदा भेद. Second, for Ramanuj, comma, identity is primary, but for Nimbark, identity and difference are equally important. Yeah, equally real. Identity and difference are equally real. Next point. For Nimbark, comma, matter and souls are not the attributes of the Brahman, ya God. Matter and souls are not the attributes of the Brahman. There is nothing outside God. Matter and souls are the powers of the Brahman or God. Matter and souls are the powers of the God. Next point लिखें. And it goes without saying that for Ramanus they are the attributes. For Nimbark they are not the attributes. Next point लिखें. Nimbark rejects Ramanuja's position that matter and souls form the body of the God. He argues that in that case, he argues that, comma, in that case, comma, the god would be subjected to the miseries and imperfections of the universe. He argues that in that case, the god would be subjected to the miseries and imperfections of the universe. तो एक की आइडियाज आपको मिला. You will not require too many points क्योंकि सिलेबस में सीधे है नहीं आपके. But sometimes they want you to compare the three eminent name with some of them. As long as you remember, it is Dvaita Dvait, it is Bheda Bhed. Again, in some way, there is a kind of slight difference with Ramanus, but overall, it is almost like Ramanus. Grace of God, God is personal, ये सब important है, and Vaishnavite tradition है, ये सब के सब. Okay. Now come to Vallabh. Vallabh is going again closer to Shankar. So he would say Advait is there, but that Advait is what? Shuddha Dvait. यानी जो अद्वैत है उसको शुद्ध होना चाहिए. In the case of Shankar, if Brahman is the only reality, then that is how Brahman is the only reality. But you remember in all of them, Brahman is actually Shri Krishna. Then what is this world? Shankar talks about Vivarth. There is no creation in real sense of the term. So he would also talk about that, but then he is different from Shankar. एक तरह से it is more like emanation. यानी the world and Brahman are one and the same. There is no transformation, there is no parinam, there is no change, modification. तो उसके लिए हमने एक शब्द दिया है अविकृत परिणामवाद. तो इनका जो व्यू है वो एक ऐसा परिणाम है जो कि हुआ नहीं है. Okay, it is not like Ramanuj, it is close to Shankar, but in Shankar it is apparent. In this case, again, emanation is there in many Western perspective. We will see in some cases a Plotinus when we come to philosophy of religion. Some of them have borrowed the idea from Plato, and then they have given theological interpretation to that, especially when it comes to explain problem of evil. So emanation का मतलब है जैसे sun and the light rays. In this case, there is a real source, and everything is coming in the world from there. So this is like a unique position. लेकिन real है एक तरह का सिर्फ और सिर्फ Brahman. And then in a unique way, as Shankar would say, what is Brahman? It is devoid of all three differences. In some cases there is this difference, and here there is no difference. क्योंकि इसी का manifestation है. तो difference है भी और नहीं भी है. When we think about जीव, it is like सजातीय, similar. When you think about jagat, jagat as in matter, it is विजातीय. And when you think about अंतर्यामी, तो अंतर्यामी के रूप में स्वगत. तो तीनों भेद इस लेवल पे हम और आप महसूस कर सकते हैं, बट अदरवाइज इट इज शुद्ध द्वैत बिकॉज दीज थ्री आर एक्सटेंशन. तो एक तरह से वर्ल्ड रियल है क्योंकि यही ब्राह्मण की ही रोशनी है. एंड देन अगेन दिस इज अ वेरी यूनिक पॉइंट. देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन संसार एंड जगत. संसार इज आवर वर्ल्ड which is due to ignorance, and jagat is eternal. So we attain liberation from sansar effectively, and this attainment can help us know who we are, and then there is no vicious cycle of birth and death. और सबसे एक और इनका जो खास है, एक लाइन बोले तो वल्लभ और पुष्टि मार्ग एक है. यानी पुष्टि मार्ग is nothing but utmost devotion, self surrender to God. It is primarily through your absolute faith in God that you can impress God, and then God will grace you with liberation. तो इनमें जो पोजीशन है वो एक तरह से है पुष्टि मार्ग, जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट है इनका. तो ये है वल्लभ का शुद्ध द्वैत. ओके, तो लिखते हैं वल्लभ, और सब में आप चाहें तो आचार्य जोड़ सकते हैं. वल्लभ आचार्य निम्बार्क आचार्य, तो फिर वहां भी आ जुड़ जाएगा. तो वल्लभ कोलन शुद्ध द्वैत. फॉर वल्लभ द ब्राह्मण इज श्री कृष्णा. हिज एसेंस इज, चाहे तो ऐसे लिख सकते हैं सत चित आनंद, या सचिद आनंद भी लिख सकते हैं. His essence is Sat Chit Anand. He, capital H, yeah, the Brahman, the God, is the abode of all good qualities. Yeah, he is the perfection personified. He is the abode of all good qualities. He includes even the seemingly, he includes even the seemingly contradictory qualities. He includes, or he is endowed with, he possesses even the seemingly contradictory qualities. He can be the, or he can be smaller. He can be, या इस भी कर सकते हैं, he can be smaller than the smallest. There's this story कि कैसे जब हनुमान is going, वो जो रास्ते में क्या नाम है जो एक मिलती है उनको, तो he हनुमान can again be the smallest of the small and the biggest of the big. Okay, God is smaller than the smallest and greater than the greatest. God is smaller than the smallest and greater than the greatest. God is one as well as many. God is one as well as many. हिडिंबा नाम था क्या? अच्छा, हाँ, महाभारत में, हाँ. घटोत्कच की हिडिंबा का भीम के साथ तो कोई एपिसोड है. भीम की वाइफ. ओके, श्री सिंह सब पे ज्यादा प्रकाश डाल सकते थे. चलिए आगे. He is one as any. He is one as well as many. He is one as well as many. He manifests himself as matter and souls. He manifests himself as matter and souls. Maya is his power, capital H. Through Maya, God manifests himself as many. The manifestation is neither Vivarth nor Parinam. The manifestation is neither Vivarth nor Parinam. It is Avikrit Parinamvad. It is Avikrit Parinamvad. The universe is the emanation from the God. Hence, Brahman is the material as well as Susahar. उनके मुंह में फिर घुस जाते हैं कुछ ऐसे ही. Brahman is, तब से आप ये सोच रहे थे नहीं, वो बात बोलते रहते हैं. I know. Brahman is the material as well as efficient cause of the universe. Brahman is the material as well as the efficient cause of the universe. God reveals his Sat existence, Sat parenthesis existence, comma, Chit parenthesis knowledge, and Anand bliss in different proportions. God reveals his Sat, Chit, Anand in different proportions. God manifests himself in diverse forms. Jagat, Jeev, and Antaryami. Jagat is Vijatiya, comma, या parenthesis, dissimilar to him, capital H. Jagat is Vijatiya, dissimilar to him. Jeeva is Sajatiya, similar to him. Antaryami is Swagat, parenthesis, inside him. Hence, there is three kinds of difference on the one hand, and yet there is no difference on the other. There are three kinds of difference on the one hand, and yet there is no difference on the other, since the Brahman himself is manifested in all the forms. इसलिए शुद्ध अद्वैत, चाहे तो पैरेंथेसिस में लिख दें यहां भी. Vallabh distinguishes between Jagat and Sansar. Jagat is the real manifestation of God. Jagat is the real manifestation of God, comma, while Sansar is the world of birth and death. It is due to the ignorance of the Jeev. The ignorance is fivefold, yani five kind. The ignorance is fivefold, colon, number one. The Jeev is ignorant of the real nature of oneself. The Jeev is ignorant of the real nature of oneself. Second, false identification with the body. Yeah, it falsely identifies with the body. False identification with the body. Third, false identification with the senses. False identification with the senses. Next, false identification with the vital breaths. This is more like pran. False identification with the vital breaths. Fifth, false identification with the internal organs. When the right knowledge dawns, is attained, basically, when the right knowledge is attained, or when the right knowledge dawns, comma, ignorance vanishes, and thereby the sansar vanishes away. But the Jagat continues. But the Jagat continues, comma, since it is the real manifestation of God. It is the real manifestation of God. For Ramanuj, comma, soul is different from God, but is essentially identical with him. Soul is different from God, but is essentially identical with him, capital H, comma, and forms his body. Forms his body. For Madhva, soul is dependent on God. याद है स्वतंत्र अस्वतंत्र. For Madhva, soul is dependent on God. But essentially, उधर बिंब प्रतिबिंब था, it is different from God. But essentially, it is different from God. For Nimbark, comma, soul is limited and dependent on God. Soul is different from God. Soul is limited and dependent on God. Soul is different from God, but as the powers of God, comma, it is identical with him. But as the power, singular is the power of God, soul is identical with him, ya God. For Vallabh, comma, although soul is identical with him, ya God or Brahman, although soul is identical with him, but it is a limited manifestation of God. It is a limited manifestation of God. Hence, it appears different. For Vallabh, bhakti is the only means of salvation या liberation. Means to भी बोल सकते हैं. Bhakti is the only means of salvation. He prescribes pushti marg. He prescribes pushti marg. It implies cultivation of absolute faith and unconditional love in God and his greatness. Absolute faith and unconditional love in God and in his greatness. Bhakti, within quote, implies loving service. Loving service. यानी कोई प्रेशर नहीं. Loving service of God, या to God. It implies attachment to God, but detachment from every other thing. It implies attachment to the God, but detachment from every other thing. It is neither worship nor knowledge. It is neither worship nor knowledge. It is Shuddha Prem, pure love. It is Shuddha Prem, pure love. चाहे कोई पुष्टि मार्ग पैरेंथेसिस में करते हैं. Salvation is attained through the grace of God, comma, and it can be earned by the purity of heart. It can be earned by the purity of heart. ये सभी प्रिलिम्स का क्वेश्चन हो सकता है पुष्टि मार्ग वगैरह. शायद 15th. चेक कीजिएगा. Okay, so the next is Chaitanya, and it is again Achintya Bheda Bhed. लिखा था मैंने. Achintya Bheda Bhed. चाहे तो as you know, अगर बाकी किसी पेपर में लिखें तो आप H डाल के लिखिए. You can avoid simple C. यहाँ भी तब आप H डाल सकते हैं. Achintya Bheda Bhed. So this is one of the Vaishnavism, which is like Bengal Vaishnavism. And Chaitanya is again talking about Krishna as the God, Sagun Brahman. This God is someone who can create Jiva through Jiva Shakti and through Maya Shakti, this world. In some way, it is again like the same reality, seen through Jiva Shakti, seen through Maya Shakti. And we have to attain salvation by pure absolute bhakti. Some aspect of bhakti can come by studying the text, and the text may prescribe guidelines. तो वो एक तरह से विधि भक्ति है. But vidhi bhakti is not sufficient. जैसे लोग बोलते हैं कि अभी रटे हुए वो समझ नहीं आ रहा है. When we go through the guidelines, we have to then reach a point which will be like ruchi bhakti, unconditional devotion towards God. And this aspect of bhakti is analogous to the love that Gopi, that Radha may have for Krishna, or we can think about even Meera's love for Krishna. So a love which is similar to the love where a beloved may try to love one's lover, or how a lover may have a love for beloved. So a seeker of Krishna should seek Krishna as one's beloved, and that is how eventually one can attain liberation. तो बहुत सारे ऐसे सूफी में भी इस तरह के elements हैं where one may love God as one's beloved, and again it is not in any way impure. It is completely like putting the beloved at the highest pedestal, and it goes beyond all kinds of bodily fulfillment. तो अब लिखेंगे हम लोग चैतन्य कोलन अचिंत्य भेदा भेद. It is the school of Bengal Vaishnavism. It is the school of Bengal Vaishnavism. Brahman is equated with Shri Krishna. His essence is Satchitanand. God is free from, devoid of. God is free from all differences. Hyphen, namely homogeneous, heterogeneous and internal, sajatiya, vijatiya and swagat. God manifests himself, capital H, as the world and the souls. God manifests himself as the world and the souls, through his powers. Thus, he is the material as well as the efficient cause of the universe. Through Jiva Shakti, God manifests himself as eternal Jeev. Through Maya Shakti, God manifests himself, capital H, as the material world. The Jeev are atomic and innumerable, plural. The Jeev are atomic and innumerable. They remain distinct, even in liberation. They remain distinct even in liberation. They emanate from the God. They emanate from the God, like the rays from the sun. The world is not unreal, since it is the manifestation of his eternal powers. Bhakti is the only soul. Bhakti is the sole means, only means of liberation. Bhakti is of two kinds. It is of two kinds. Number one, Vidhi Bhakti. It is cultivated by studying scriptures, Ved. It is cultivated by studying Ved. दूसरा, रुचि, ऐसे भी लिख सकते हैं, रुचि Bhakti. It is unconditional love of God. A way of life where one submits oneself to the absolute service of God. Vidhi Bhakti is the means and Ruchi Bhakti is the end. Ruchi Bhakti is intense spiritual love of God. Intense spiritual love of God. The love that gopis and Radha have for Krishna. The love which that gopis, G-O-P-I-S, and Radha, maintain kar sakte hain apostrophe, have for Krishna. Thus, bhakti is to love God as one's lover. Bhakti is to love God as one's lover and regards oneself as the beloved of God. And regards oneself as the beloved of God. Hence, thus, liberation consists in the eternal enjoyment. Liberation consists in the eternal enjoyment of the blissful love for Krishna. Liberation consists in the eternal enjoyment of the blissful love for Krishna. So with this, very comprehensively, we have covered the last component, which was Vedant in a way, but we have covered Shankar, Ramanuja, Madhva, Sri Aurobindo, and we have come to some Vaishnavite traditions also. Okay, तो कुछ questions और देखते हैं. They are not specific to one, but it may run through several traditions, and when you can write them well, it may give you some opportunity to take edge over your competitor. क्योंकि ये वो question है that can create right impression in the minds of the examiner. कि बहुत opportunity मिलेंगे आपको compare contrast करने का. So let's go through them quickly. 2016. Is the doctrine of self acceptable in the modern age of science and reason? Question mark. Examine the view in the light of Indian philosophy. तो ये क्वेश्चन ऐसा है कि इसके लिए आपको कुछ रटने की जरूरत नहीं है. It has to go beyond what you have studied. If you could relate with them, so then it can make a world of difference. We will be, however, studying some topics in philosophy of religion, immortality of self, soul. तो अगर आप आज के संदर्भ में देखें तो क्या ये डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सेल्फ इज एक्सेप्टेबल इन द मॉडर्न एज ऑफ साइंस एंड रीजन? तो क्या बोलेंगे, हाँ या ना? इसको एक स्टूडेंट के रूप में ऐसे बोल सकते हैं that if we see the doctrine of self as a metaphysical notion, then in the modern age of science and reason, it may not appear tenable, acceptable. But if we understand it as epistemological and ethical notion of self, then it is very much relevant. The Atman doctrine implies a sense of universal kinship. So, किस metaphysical sense में, where there is a kind of cycle of life and death, isolation, but even as in natural sense, there is some kind of universality. Underneath diversity, plurality, it appears there is a self as the universal principle of governance. There is a kind of universal kinship. And when we say from global platforms, it is one earth, one family, one future, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, it is very much supported with reason and scientific worldview, जो शब्द में दिया है. तो आप उस हिसाब से देखें तो फिर self as a character is something that can help us relate with. So when you think about self, like Gandhi's self as a character, it can inspire us and we can think about with reason and again scientific approach how ought one to live. The self of Socrates is as much relevant today as it was then. तो यदि इंडियन फिलोसफी का है जिसमें आप जाएं, कैसे सेल्फ का सेल्फलेसनेस बताने के लिए बुद्धिज्म का अनात्मवाद आपको लगता है बहुत रेलेवेंट है. So to come out of egocentric worldview, when we go through the doctrine of self, अनात्मवाद of Buddhism, it can be supported with reason and scientific evidence. तो एक आपने आत्मन डॉक्ट्रिन ले लिया वेदांत से, एक आपने ले लिया नॉन वेदांत ट्रेडिशन. तो आपने जो इंपॉर्टेंट बातें कही उससे लग रहा है कि इट इज वेरी मच रेलेवेंट. अगेन आई सेड एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल सेल्फ एज वन हु इज द नोवर, एज वन हु इज द एजेंट एंड हु कैन बी द एंजॉयर एज वेल. इन सम वे दिस सेल्फ इज वेरी मच रेलेवेंट एंड यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दीज कॉन्सेप्शंस ऑफ सेल्फ इन ए नॉर्मेटिव वे, इन एन एथिकल वे, इन एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल वे, एंड डोंट टेक इट लिटरली. एंड इवन व्हेन इफ वी थिंक अबाउट self being immortal, who may change clothes on a regular basis, so it implies that we can renew our character, we can be reborn the moment we transform our thinking, the moment we try to know our true being at the level of a thought, word and deed, there is radical transformation. तो इस हिसाब से भी वो relevant है. 2014, how is the theory of causation central to the theories of reality in classical Indian tradition? तो causation कैसे central है? तो फिर से आपको दो important causation की theory को याद करना होगा, सत्य कार्यवाद, असत्य कार्यवाद. And in some way, even if you think about Charvak, though there is element of Asatya Karyavad, it is not right to put a Pratit Samutpad in any of these two. And then Nagarjuna has come out with a different interpretation. But even there, Pratit Samutpad is central. Charvaka's explanation of consciousness as AP phenomenon is also a kind of causation, though by rejecting Vyapti relation, they are rejecting causation as a universal and necessary principle. Within Satya Karyavad, Asatya Karyavad, you understand their counter arguments. Asatya Karyavad, एक important नाम है परमाणु कारणवाद of न्याय वैशेषिक. Satya Karyavad in general would say if effect is non-existent, then something that does not exist can never come into existence. And if they are completely different, why you need only say seeds for extraction of oil? Why you need milk for curd? You could have extracted oil from sand, or water could have converted into curd, but that's not happening. Satya Karyavad, Parinamvad, Vivartavad. Prakriti Parinamvad, and then Brahma Parinamvad in Ramanuja. Brahma Vivartavad of Shankar, and he believes the moment you talk about Parinamvad, you toe the line of Asatya Karyavad. Conclusion के लिए आप बोल सकते हैं नागार्जुना. अभी ऐसे एक यूनिक पोजीशन आपने देखा. और विपरीत परिणामवाद मध्वा में याद है, सद असद कार्यवाद यानी सत असत्य कार्यवाद मध्वा में भी है. ओके. 2002, while the Nastic Darshans reject outrightly the existence of God, the Astic Darshanas do not seem to accord central position to his existence. Explain and evaluate critically the remark. Could you get the question? कि नास्तिक दर्शन तो गॉड के एग्जिस्टेंस को रिजेक्ट करते ही है, लेकिन जो आस्तिक दर्शन है वो भी गॉड के एग्जिस्टेंस को सेंट्रल पोजीशन नहीं देते. And what is Nastic and Astic? It has nothing to do with atheism and theism. It has to do with anastha in Vedic scriptures and astha in Vedic scriptures. And which are the Astic traditions where you don't see that God has not been given central position? जिस ऑर्डर में हम लोग गए, न्याय सेंट्रल पोजीशन गॉड को है, है, लेकिन खूब अच्छे से नहीं है। विद गॉड 9 द्रव्याज आर एग्जिस्टिंग। तो मजा नहीं आ रहा। गॉड इज नॉट दैट काइंड ऑफ अ परफेक्ट बीइंग। वैशेषिक सेम, सांख्य निरीश्वर सांख्य, गॉड है ही नहीं। न्याय में तो होके भी नहीं है, उतना मजा नहीं आ रहा है कि गॉड के साथ साथ कुछ लोग हैं वो बियॉन्ड क्रिएशन है, बियॉन्ड डिस्ट्रक्शन है। योगा में गॉड है, बट गॉड इज लाइक द आइडियल कैरेक्टर हु कैन हेल्प अस ड्रॉ इंस्पिरेशन एंड देन ऑल्सो ईश्वर प्रणिधान, वी कैन हैव सम सेंस ऑफ से डिवोशन, इट कैन हेल्प अस कल्टिवेट सर्टेन राइट कंडक्ट। और जब आप ध्यान भी लगाते हैं तो यू कैन फिक्स योर ध्यान टू गॉड। वेदांत में, मीमांसा में फिर से अपौरुष्य, सांख्य में टेक्स्ट इज अपौरुष्य, शंकर में दिस गॉड इज नॉट द पर्सनल गॉड, इट हैज ओनली व्यवहारिक रियलिटी, नॉट अल्टीमेट रियलिटी। बट यस, इन रामानुज मध्वा या आप ऑल वैष्णवाइट ट्रेडिशन में बोल सकते हैं that God has been given central position, but thus you do see that Astic tradition, if we think in terms of a 6 Astic tradition, तो वेदांत में भी very important, Vedantin will not accord central position, and in Mimamsa and Sankhya not central position. 2000 give a comparative account of the concept of causation as found in the various schools of Indian thought. तो आप पहले conception बना लें, which is सत्य कार्यवाद, असत्य कार्यवाद, and then you discuss with reference to all the tradition and you draw the points of comparison, difference, contrast, और final conclusion में आप किसकी बात कर सकते हैं? Nagarjuna. That how Nagarjuna has with so much reason and logic argued that no theory can be absolute in itself, they are all supplementary, they are interdependent, conditioned. 97 next, compare and contrast the various views on the nature of the self and its liberation in the various schools of Indian philosophy, both ऑर्थोडॉक्स यानी आस्तिक एंड हेटेरोडॉक्स नास्तिक। तो कितने व्यूज हैं? अगर हेटेरोडॉक्स याद करें तो देहात्मवाद, जैन चारवाक, एंड चारवाक में क्या है? लिबरेशन, मरणम एव अपवर्गा, जैना जीव अनंत चतुष्टय, त्रिरत्न, सम्यक दर्शन, सम्यक ज्ञान, सम्यक चरित्र। एंड इन द केस ऑफ अनात्मवाद अगेन देयर इज ए कॉन्सेप्शन ऑफ निर्वाण व्हिच इज मोर लाइक थ्रू सेल्फलेसनेस। यू रिमेंबर अष्टांग मार्ग, अष्टांगिक मार्ग, 8 फोल्ड पाथ, उसमें भी देखा जाए तो प्रज्ञाशील समाधि है व्हिच कम्स क्लोज टू जैनास त्रिरत्न। इन सम वे इन बोथ द केसेस देयर इज नो गॉड एंड लिबरेशन इज ओनली अटेन्ड थ्रू राइट knowledge. The root cause is ignorance and the cause of liberation is right knowledge. When you come to orthodox, Nyaya mein right knowledge is important, but then grace of God is needed. Wherever there is a personal God, so until God would not allow us with prasad, we cannot attain it. तो आप इधर क्या बोलेंगे कि orthodox tradition में we can have samuchayavad, and in some cases ज्ञान मार्ग, भक्ति मार्ग, कर्म मार्ग, all of them together, and in many cases ज्ञान मार्ग alone, as Shankar would say. However, wherever there is a personal God, an element of devotion and grace of God is needed. तो इस हिसाब से आप इधर ऑर्थोडॉक्स में शंकर को थोड़ा सा अलग करेंगे। इन द केस ऑफ अगेन शंकर यू कॉन्ट्रास्ट इट विद धर्म जिज्ञासा एंड ब्रह्म जिज्ञासा। तो मीमांसा में भी धर्म जिज्ञासा है। सांख्य अगेन नो गॉड एंड स्टिल इट इज ऑल अबाउट राइट नॉलेज, डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी नॉलेज। तो इस हिसाब से भी दिखाएं। देन यू थिंक अबाउट औरबिंदु ऑल्सो। जितने लोग हैं ब्रीफली आप उन सब के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं। 92 explain the conceptions of the soul or the self with a special reference to the schools of Buddhism, Sankhya, Nyaya and the Vedantic system. As you had seen in some of the questions I had asked you to think about some important tradition. तो इन्होंने यहाँ चारवाक नहीं दिया है, but it says with a special reference. यानी you can briefly talk about somewhere चारवाक also, you can briefly talk about Jaina एक लाइन में भी, लेकिन फोकस कहाँ पे देना है? बुद्धिज्म, अनात्मवाद, सांख्य पुरुष एंड देन बहु पुरुषवाद, न्याय आत्मन। सांख्य में सत एंड चित्त पुरुष के पास, न्याय में आत्मन हैज सत अलोन, इन वेदांत सत चित आनंद, इन शंकर आत्म च ब्रह्मन, इन रामानुज इट इज प्रकार, इट इज चिद चिद विशिष्ट, इन द केस ऑफ मध्वा इट इज अस्वतंत्र, इट इज डिपेंडेंट, बिंब प्रतिबिंब। और बाद में आप थोड़ा सा और बिंदु भी लिख सकते हैं और बोल सकते हैं रामानुज के साथ वैष्णवाइट्स लाइक नाम दे दीजिए, कम वेरी क्लोज, वहां पे एक्सप्लेन करने की जरूरत नहीं है। 92 explain and critically examine the nature, conditions and validity of प्रत्यक्ष प्रमाण according to the न्याय and विज्ञानवाद school. तो विज्ञानवाद एंड न्याय में प्रत्यक्ष को लेके क्या अंतर है? नेचर, कंडीशंस एंड वैलिडिटी। क्या है नेचर? सो प्रत्यक्ष is a praman, valid praman for nyaya. But for Vigyanvad, Pratyaksh cannot give you the knowledge of the real. क्यों? क्योंकि Vigyanvad believes in hierarchy of truth. Vigyanvad याद आ रहा है ना आपको? कौन Vigyanvad? किसका ट्रेडिशन? कोई कुछ बताएं विज्ञानवाद? वेदांतिन हैं कि नैयायिकाज? हाँ, कौन थे विज्ञानवाद वाले? बुद्धिस्ट थे। योगाचार, महायाना में एक ट्रेडिशन विज्ञानवादी योगाचार। ऑल इज विज्ञान, ऑल इज कॉन्शियसनेस। असंग, वसुबंधु आर सम ऑफ द इंपॉर्टेंट नेम, मैत्रेयनाथ। तो विज्ञानवादिन्स आर आइडियलिस्टिक ट्रेडिशन एंड व्हाट वुड दे से? परिकल्पित, परतंत्र, परिनिष्पन्न। सो व्हाट इज रियल? विज्ञान मात्र। As alay vigyan, there is reality, or it is like the storehouse consciousness. The way a dream has its own relative value, similarly this world has its own relative truth. What is internal appears as external. So for Nyaya, the nature of a Pratyaksh is that it is a Praman, and it can give you the knowledge of the ultimate. याद है न्याय में प्रत्यक्ष का क्या पोजीशन था? प्रत्यक्ष को याद आ रहा है? न्याय कैसे डिफाइन करती है प्रत्यक्ष को? इंद्रियार्थ सन्निकर्ष जन्यम. But then this definition is fit for logic. not for alaukic. And then they come out with साक्षात प्रतीति. And then they talk about omniscience, यानी जो बोधि ज्ञान है इनके लिए, विज्ञानवाद के लिए, that बोधि ज्ञान is where फाइनल लेवल, जो कि परिनिष्पन्न है, परिकल्पित, परतंत्र, परिनिष्पन्न. That is something which yoga's pratyaksh has in the case of न्याय वैशेषिक. One is in this world, but not through senses. Intuitively, one is having omniscient state of knowledge. तो इस हिसाब से न्याय वैशेषिक में बहुत सारी इसमें बात है, तो उसको आपको emphasize करना है. Nature is that it is a प्रमाण, but for विज्ञानवाद it has only empirical validity, परतंत्र, not actual validity or absolute validity. For न्याय वैशेषिक, this world is real. ये और बात है कि there is a causal state, but this is the effect. Effect is now into existence as a real. So hence, effect world is also real in this form and also in the द्रव्याज form. तो इस world के knowledge को प्रत्यक्ष से आप अनुमान लगा जानते हैं, and you can go up to even yoga's level. In the case of विज्ञानवाद, condition is that it is a conditioned and it cannot remain relevant when one goes from paratantra to parinishpan stage. In the case of nyaya, it is conditioned by sense object contact in lockic pratyaksh, but in alokik pratyaksh it is unconditioned. It is intuitive also, especially yoga. Samanya lakshan, jnana lakshan, yogas are absolutely unconditioned. They are not dependent on any space or time. Okay, validity. तो validity आपने बताया है कि न्याय के लिए it has validity, real validity is a प्रमाण. In the case of विज्ञानवाद, it has empirical validity. Then you can also talk about how for न्याय वैशेषिक, a knowledge in itself is neutral. Its validity and invalidity is known gradually through extrinsic validity, extrinsic invalidity. Nature of truth is correspondence and test of truth is what? Pragmatic. Or in विज्ञानवाद generally, Buddhism हमने generally जो किया है वो आप बोल सकते हैं. So in this case, it has intrinsic invalidity and extrinsic validity, but everything is relative. So 89. Explain the various views in Indian philosophy regarding the nature and validity of Shabd Praman. So this maybe you should go to orthodox and heterodox, and you talk about how heterodox tradition would reject the Vedic scripture. But in the case of Buddhism, they accept their own classical teachings of Buddha, which is like Tipitak, and then you have many other teachings, including Nagarjuna's text, etc. Jaina में भी वही बात है, they have their angas. In the case of Orthodox, for Nyaya Vaisheshik, the Shabd Praman is what? Personal. For Sankhya, for Mimamsa, impersonal. In the case of Shankar, these texts are like the path, the means. You have to seek Brahmagyan through these latter, and thereby it is a state to realize. And any state where we are going through Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan, where we have subject-object duality, can never be the final stage of realization. So when we go beyond the text, we have consolidated the teaching, then that final Brahma Vakya, Mahavakya is whispered, and that is like Tat Tvam Asi, and it is a state of self-realization. So जितने फिर से Vaishnavites हैं, उनके लिए it is a personal teaching of God Himself. कुछ बहुत सारे important points थे that we had discussed during how Nyaya and Mimamsa will differ. We have seen certain theories pertaining to the understanding of a passage. How Kumaril and Prabhakar will differ. So Anvaya position of Prabhakar is very different from Abhihitanvayavad of Kumaril and Nyaya Vaisheshik. तो कुछ बातें कि meaning is not the sentence, according to Prabhakar it is the sentence which is the unit of meaning. तो इस तरह से जो important बातें हैं उसको भी आपको emphasize करना है. मीमांसा में शब्द प्रमाण is the central objective of life, अथातो धर्म जिज्ञासा. It seems all other प्रमाण supplement शब्द प्रमाण, चाहे वो अर्थापत्ति हो या चाहे अनुपलब्धि हो, चाहे अनुमान हो, चाहे अनुमान हो, चाहे उपमान हो. What you have read in early chapters and when you are towards the middle or last, suddenly in the light of new information, in the wake of new realization, many things that you have studied earlier would be better understood. जैसे उपमान में उन्होंने example दिया था, remembered cow is similar to perceived cow, and that is उपमान. Okay, तो ये सब जो basic कहानियां हैं आपको समझनी है सारी tradition से. So you can see that Indian philosophy is very systematic, organized. Their theme, you take the theme of a soul, and from Charvak till Aurobindo. You take the view of liberation from Charvak to Aurobindo. You take the position on God और यहाँ से वहाँ world क्या है, causation क्या है, liberation का path क्या है, तो organize करना शुरू कीजिए. And the moment you have certain clarity about basic issues, फिर प्रमाण कीजिए. तो चारवाक में कौन सा प्रमाण, बाकी tradition में कौन सा प्रमाण, and over a period of time you can reduce the central elements in maybe 20 sheets. और उनको आप flip करते रहिए, एक मिनट में एक पेज जाएगा. And you'll be able to consolidate them within half an hour. तो धीरे धीरे जाइए, go, don't apply shortcut. Invest time, and next time when you come to that topic, you can reap the advantage. जैसे सही जगह इन्वेस्ट कीजिएगा तो इंटरेस्ट अच्छा मिलेगा, लेकिन गलत जगह इन्वेस्ट होगा वो सारा डूब जाएगा और फिर से नए सिरे से. तो डोंट लुक फॉर शॉर्टकट. जो चीज आप 2 घंटे में करने का बैठे हैं उसको आप बेशक टेक टाइम और 5 घंटे में कीजिए, बट प्रिपेयर योर स्केलेटन, प्रिपेयर योर बुलेट पॉइंट, सो दैट नेक्स्ट टाइम यू डोंट स्टार्ट फ्रॉम स्क्रैच. यू हैव समथिंग टू बिगिन विद, एंड इन दिस साइक्लिकल मैनर यू कैन कंसोलिडेट. क्वेश्चन पेपर्स आर दी विंडोज. अब कभी सीधे सीधे किसी फिलोसोफर के घर पे नहीं जाइए, खिड़की से देखिए तब जाइए. क्वेश्चन इज योर विंडो, उससे उसको देखिए पहले, फिर खिड़की छोड़ के दरवाजे से जाके पढ़ के एंड अगेन कंसोलिडेट. तो नाउ वी हैव कंक्लूडेड पेपर 1 properly and we'll start with philosophy of religion section from tomorrow. लगभग 10 टॉपिक हैं and maybe लिखना बहुत कम होगा, तो we'll be able to wind it up in 5 days में भी 2 टॉपिक्स, शुरू में कुछ टाइम लगेगा, बाद में टॉपिक्स जल्दी जल्दी निकलने लगेंगे. Many of them we have already discussed in Western and Indian tradition also. तो मान के चलिए ज्यादा से ज्यादा अगर tomorrow is a Wednesday तो शायद अगले मंडे ट्यूसडे तक रिलीजन खत्म हो जाएगा. सोशल पॉलिटिकल में भी 10 टॉपिक है, तो फिर से लगभग वही 2 टॉपिक हम लोग रोज कर लेंगे. तो 4 दिन में भी कुछ टॉपिक्स एक दिन में भी 3-4 हो जाएगा सोशल पॉलिटिकल में. फिर ऑल प्रोबेबिलिटी नेक्स्ट फ्राइडे टू नेक्स्ट फ्राइडे, आई थिंक इज व्हाट 5th April, राइट. अगर जरूरत पड़ी तो वी मे गो इन दैट वीक टू सैटरडे संडे, बट आई डोंट वांट यू आल्सो टू रिमेन स्टक बियॉन्ड 7th April. तो 7th April मैक्सिमम लेके चलिए, हो सकता है 1-2 दिन पहले भी खत्म हो जाए. ठीक है, तो चलिए, थैंक यू फॉर योर पार्टिसिपेशन. विल बिगिन फिलोसफी ऑफ रिलीजन फ्रॉम टुमारो. थैंक यू, सी यू.